Once upon a time, an intrepid young man named Liu was being chased by the police at full speed. Next to him was a girl named Angie, who looks quite calm, even with what they were experiencing. Liu confidently assures Angie that they will soon escape from the police, although she does not seem very sure of them, and looking in the rearview mirror, the agents begin to open fire. Bullets ricochet all over Liu's car, causing Angie to panic, so he decides to duck and calmly claims that now that they are allowed to shoot, they have made things difficult for them. However, he seems undeterred and drives more recklessly, suddenly changing lanes, which leads him to a tunnel, and inside, Liu hands him blank grenades, which surprises Angie. But without hesitation, she decides to throw them against the police, and when it seemed that they were going to escape, a BST tank crosses their path, and when Liu sees its emblem, he is completely stunned. After that, we see Liu in a coffee shop, listening to some news of some protests against the distributors of a drug that turned their patients into so-called Bloodivores. Next to him was a guy complaining about how the government was treating these people. While they were talking, an attack of one of these Bloodivores occurs, where we see that a crazy guy throws himself on a woman, and as if it were a vampire begins to bite her neck. And only in seconds a squadron appears to neutralize him, which surprised Liu. Angie comments that it must be because of the protests, but then she gives him the signal to implement his plan, while the other boy watched furiously as they beat that Bloodivore. Then, they enter what seems to be a bank to rob it. The scared manager comments that they have nothing, because they had already taken it the day before. But the brown-haired boy doesn't believe him and demands the teller's password, to which the bald guy replies that he doesn't know it because they change it every day, so he begs for forgiveness. Liu believes in his words, and while hacking the computer he agrees with the bald guy, but he proposes a solution, which is to reset the configuration, forcing the system to update. To this the bald guy responded incredulously that it was impossible. However, Liu managed to be able to change it in those seconds, and after Angie deactivates the alarm and give them 5 minutes, Liu throws him a pendrive with which they open the vault, and then he calls a chief on to be ready to pick them up. The chief on arrives in a few moments, as calm as possible. At the same time they are looting, the bald guy tries to persuade the brown-haired guy, but he gets angry and starts hitting the guy because he knows those dirty tricks. Once they seem to have gotten what they wanted, they start to run, while Wenshao complained to the bald guy what they did to those who couldn't pay, but at that Liu calls him and he also follows him. Wenshao protests that they still had time to take more money, but Liu replies that this way they are fine, according to the plan, so he protests, but Liu replies that he doesn't owe him explanations. At that Liu drops some bills, and Wenshao, uncovering his face, decides to take them, but at that a kid comes out of the bathroom and he threatens to shoot. Liu stops him and begins to struggle with him. Then the alarm reaches the police, who immediately go to them. When they were about to flee, Wenshao does not want to let Angie go upstairs, pointing to the head, because his collar was activated and they can easily track them. But Liu replies with a smile that this is not the case, throwing the briefcase as a distraction and running away with Angie. But when she asks him why, he replies that it's because he wants to be with her forever. Returning to the present, we see that they had been arrested, and a reporter comments that the 4 suspects were minors and one of them is known as the Peace Boy. They are taken to an interrogation, where a guy asks Liu about his true intentions, but he seems calm and frivolously confesses that he is guilty. Before that behavior, the policeman grabs him by the shirt with fury, reproaching him for the lives of the 15 people. He, without knowing anything, sees that on a piece of paper he had written that the hostages had perished, something that left him terrified. At the same time, at the top, Liu's father promises to take care of cleaning up the situation. After that, the 4 would be taken to trial, where they would be insulted by the people there. But Liu tries to deduce who could have done that. However, Chief On incriminates him, and Liu accuses Chief On. At that the judge enters and, reading the sentence, makes a dramatic silence, communicating that they were sentenced to be eliminated, causing excitement to all who were there. But Wenshao in despair pleads that he had not done anything. After that, Liu meets his father. He asks him why he had done it, questioning if he had found his mother, which infuriates Liu, who asks him not to talk about her and asking him to leave him alone and saying he does not want to see him again. Then his father grabs him by the arm and begins to burn him. Already at night, the 4 would be transported by a convoy, and halfway they opened the doors and the agents shot at will. We see a memory in which Liu's father gave a speech about his research into something that would be key to the development of the world. That day he presented the child of peace to the world, although the reporters did not understand. With little Liu came his mother Shimin Guching, who explains that the child is a crossbreed between human and Bloodivore, which caused a stir among the reporters. She claims that the child is 5 years old and has never had the impulses of a Bloodivore, so they consider him the hope of humanity, which unleashed a wave of photos, to then wake up from the middle of the nightmare in which he was being shot. But in doing so, he could notice that he was locked up with 2 unknown people, and next to him there was a backpack with clothes and a gun. So he tries to look in the other backpacks to try to see who he was with, although when trying to do so, one of them makes him an immobilizing key. At that, the girl wakes up, confused to be alive, so the red-haired guy asks them if they had also been sentenced to be eliminated. Liu remembers what happened in the convoy and how before they were mowed down, one motioned them to the ground, and then if they were shot with a tranquilizer. The red-haired guy changes his clothes and asks them their names and crimes. Liu introduces himself and the girl named Cho Ifan also, claiming she did financial fraud. After them, the red-haired guy introduces himself as Li Xin and that he is a professional eliminator. He comments that they must have weapons in their backpacks, that because his was full, so he concludes that a good fight must be about to break out. At that moment, a beep starts to sound that stuns them, but at that moment, the doors open, showing that they were in a warehouse full of those containers with more Bloodivores, who were confused when they came out. Then a voice welcomes them to Aori, and then a door opens, through which a woman comes out, who, to everyone's surprise, was Angie, who tells them that they had cancelled their sentence. Liu, astonished. The prisoners were thrilled to hear that, but their smile would change when the fake Angie informs them that they will be there in Aori for the rest of their lives. One of them gets angry and tries to frighten her, and using his strength he uncovers her torso, but as he tries to take advantage of her, Chi-Fon jumps to her defense and taking off his jacket covers her, threatening to make them pay if anyone comes near him. At that, Liu notices something in the collars and yells at Chi-Fon not to fight. At that, one of the prisoners points a gun at Liu and orders him to shut up, but noticing the Angie, he orders him to move, just as other guys start to surround Ifan and Shin, expressing their lewd desires towards the women. Wen Chao comes to Liu's rescue, pointing his gun at the guy who pointed it at Liu. He is surprised to see him there, but Wen Chao, annoyed, asks him for explanations of everything that had happened, claiming that he was furious. Then, the girl comments that her mission there will be to survive, and suddenly something falls from the ceiling. In another part, the agent who interrogated Liu was analyzing the convoy that had been attacked, deducing that they had been dangerous people who go against the government. Meanwhile, in Aori, some monsters appear through the back door and begin to devour the prisoners. Some began to fight and others to flee, but in that place a horrible nightmare was taking place. Liu and Angie take cover, and trying to stay safe they meet Ifan. But one of the monsters tries to attack him, but from his chest comes out a tremendous repulsive wave that sends him flying backwards. Shin calls this power Himamante. After being shot, Liu shouts to Angie if he was okay, but at that moment the monster stopped being stunned and tried to attack the girls. But Shin appears and fights against the monster, trying to cut it. Although the girls ran away from one of those bugs, another one would start chasing them. In another part, a group of the survivors tied several dynamites, but when trying to have them ready, a monster devoured them. Then the dynamite fell near Chi-Fon. Still without understanding anything, he would take it and, dodging the monster, threw the dynamite at the door, causing debris to fall and a crack opened in the wall, through which many fled. But the girls were cornered, but Liu jumps to their aid and, demonstrating that he can fly, takes them to a ventilation duct. Although at that moment he sees Shin, but when trying to help him, he refuses to go, claiming that he will be fine. Meanwhile, the others who had crossed the exit had realized that after this there was no more exit, so, cornered, they begin to be devoured. Meanwhile, through the ventilation ducts, Liu and the girls were moving, but when the paths split, they suggest to stay together. At that, it is explained that Liu was a Himamante, and that he possessed a power, a trait that are strange to see in Bloodivores. He then pulls 3 bullets from his gun, which he fires through the ventilation ducts, while questioning what all is going on and that they are possibly behind the Hemamancers. Where the other prisoners were cornered, Liu's suspicion would begin to be confirmed, as several of them began to manifest their Himamante skills, and with these skills they managed to make a barricade. On the other hand, Liu and the girls would come out of the ventilation ducts to what seems to be an office. Ifan fears that there are monsters there too, but he comments that by the state in which it is, he believes it may be safe. However, he proposes to check the area. Turning around, he notices that Angie's clothes had ripped near her melons, so blushing he comments that they should look for clothes for her. That makes her nervous, so he embarrassedly leaves to get supplies and secure the area. This makes Ifan scoff at how innocent he is, but although he is fine with the supplies, she wishes to have a bath. As he investigated the area, he could find no indication that there was anything or anyone there. However, he believes that they had to evacuate in emergency because of the state in which the rooms are. But in that, he sees what looks like the plans of the building, which should have been completed within 2 years, so he is surprised, because it seems that it had been abandoned for more than 50 years. Liu begins to remember that one day when he was a child the police arrived at the school where he was. Liu's friend comments that maybe they were there for him, They were still talking when a badly wounded man comes through the door. This man would ask them to evacuate as they were under Bloodivore attack, so the children went out alarmed to find a safe place as he had suggested, but Liu was stopped and not let out of the classroom, as it is the orders of his father. Outside the classroom there were many screams of frightened children. But then the teacher exclaimed a cry of pain, and then the Bloodivore enters the classroom claiming that he had finally found him. Back to the present, Angie and Ifan would be in the bathrooms, but when Angie undressed, Ifan bothers her by asking her what her relationship with the Prota, and approaching her ear she assumes that they were dating, a statement that makes Angie nervous. Angie tries to reproach her, but Ifan comments that she had eliminated her husband, adding that, although she was only a little older than them, she had already been divorced 5 times. Taking advantage of her distraction, Ifan approaches her from behind and begins to squeeze her melons to continue bothering her with Liu. Liu was packing some things, continues to remember what happened that day. That criminal took him up to the rooftop and showing him on the shore, so that they would not do anything to him. He was waiting for the boy's father to arrive. What will happen next will be a matter of luck. At that comes a drone with which the criminal communicated with Liu's father. The guy tries to blackmail him with his son, but the Prota's father remained cool and calm. But the guy began to threaten the boy to throw him, so the scared little Liu begs his father to save him. However, the boy's father pleads that he cannot agree to his demands, even if he takes his son hostage, so he apologizes to his son, and as icing on the cake, the criminal begins to mock his reality, for telling him that it doesn't matter if he was the son of a god, that because he is a Bloodivore, everyone will abandon him. After that he throws it and a shot takes the criminal's life, and as Liu falls, he can remember how his companions and master sold him. That would be the first time he would awaken his power. Back in the present, a blue mark appears on the wound his father had given him. The agent in charge does not understand how it happened that all the Bloodivores who were sentenced were attacked in their convoys. Analyzing the case, he receives a call, but once he hangs up, he tries to decipher what was behind that event in which all had perished in an accident. He enters the database to try Liu's information, but notices that his data is confidential, so, looking for his companions, he notices that the 3 of them were in the same orphanage as him, so he decides to go investigate. Liu and the girls go out into what looks like the hallway of a school, but first, he asked them to be on the lookout for anything and to let him know. When they were walking about the objectives he had, Angie comments that it is strange that they are on a 4th floor when before they were in a vault. Before that, Liu comments that it is possible that they are in a space-time intersection, so between him and Angie conclude that they are in another world or reality. When they reach in the barricade of the other prisoners, there began to be problems, because the Himamontes do not seem to hold much more the advance of the monsters. One of them incites the other prisoners to help to hold the door, so they decide to support. Chi-Fan tries to think of something, although there are others who lose hope, and one of them decides to blow himself up, although others tried to avoid it. But in desperation, Wenchao opens fire on the guy, not being able to avoid crying for what he has just done. Seeing him crying, Chi-Fan remembers one day he was getting beaten up and insulted by other guys when Wenchao came to his aid, but in the end more guys came and would beat them up. After remembering that, Chi-Fan tries to control him, promising that they will get out of there, taking responsibility for them being there. And being the oldest of the 4, he approaches the Himament to let him out, although that ends up worrying everyone. Chi-Fan yells at them that there is no point in staying there, because sooner or later they will get tired, claiming that he will use the grenade to open the door. Liu was guarding his steps so as not to attract the monster that seems to be with them. Ifan asks him if he can jump, but he explains that no, because it is very limited what he can do, because if he moves too much or carries too much weight it will break, and he can only use it at 10 meters. At that moment the monster suddenly appears behind them, so he had to pull the girls, and after using his skill he grabs a metal rod which he buries in the monster's head again and again. But it seems that nothing stops him. The girls were running away when another monster appeared in front of them, so Angie started to shoot it, but when they reached the door, Ifan betrayed Angie by throwing her towards the monster, which managed to wound her, but he managed to save her before it finished devouring her. Ifan ran down the corridor, running into a dead end. Liu checks Angie's wound, noting that it is deep, and without having time for anything, the monsters were lurking, so he takes her and promises her that they will get out alive. Ifan returned to help Liu, but he left her to her fate, leaving her shocked. While Liu escapes with Angie, he sticks his staff against the ground and the monster sticks it in his chest, but because of the speed, it flies out falling on him. The prisoners, seeing how Chi-Fan climbed up the pile of machines that were piled up, begin to mock him, taunts that, although they bother him, he decides to ignore them. When he reaches the top, he encounters the head of the android that supplanted Angie, which upon seeing him pass begins to illuminate his robotic eye. Chi-Fon would try to cross through an opening when the movements of the monsters caused the structure to shudder. Liu's arm begins to glow, and upon waking up, he could see Angie next to him badly wounded and with her pulse weak, so he must act fast to stop the bleeding. But at that he notices that the monster was still alive, albeit under rubble. He took his gun and took out a bullet, and then spread the powder on her wound, and then making sparks with the stone he would burn the wound. When he turned around to shoot, the monster had surprisingly vanished. He concludes that it was his last strength, but he doesn't see the logic of the disappearance. But fortunately he managed to stop Angie's bleeding. Chi-Fon was about to be crushed, but he was also about to get out. But someone managed to pull him by the hand and get him out of there, although it seems that the guy just woke up. Chi-Fon asks him about his identity and how he had gotten there. He answers that he doesn't know, he just woke up there. But the guy starts to strangle him, and with a crazy look he asks for Liu's father. Liu's father was called by what seems to be the high command of the government. They reproach him that they received an alert from the sapphire in Aori, so they ask him why he gave it to his son. He answers that it was necessary, although these people did not take it in a good way. One of them calms the others down and asks him if he had any reason, but he replied no, just that they had no other options and that boy was the best candidate, clarifying that it's all his plan. The leader of that group gives him the go-ahead, but warns him not to forget his place. Meanwhile, Liu tries to make a hole through the wall so he can flee, while remembering what had happened since the bank robbery. But frustrated and exhausted, the metal rod breaks, starting to cry. He wants to stay calm. At that his arm begins to glow, and he remembers what his father did to him and intuits that it was not random. When he touches it, from it emerge many panels that form a systems screen, which awaits his orders, and he asks for information about the Bloodivores, discovering that it has all kinds of information. So he looks for information about their blood, which is compatible with normal humans and helps to heal wounds. So he decides to use it with Angie. This guy is a walking Dewey's Machina. He asks for information from Aori, discovering that it is the home of the medicine that caused the awakening of the Bloodivores. After that, the government decided to erase that area with many of those Bloodivores. After that, the system was shut down and he gave to drink his blood fluid to Angie. Returned with Chi-Fon. The guy makes fun of the situation because to use grenades should not be something simple, in that a monster enters where they are. But to Chi-Fon's surprise, he managed to break his face with a simple blow, in turn causing the barricade to fall. Chi-Fon is surprised by the strength of the guy, but is scared to see so many monsters in front. However, the guy is not scared in the least, and with simple blows as if it were a game begins to destroy the monsters. The prisoners are shocked, but the blonde guy comments that he is a disqualified. Liu Yao declared an S-rank criminal for being very dangerous, as much as a demon. Liu's blood fluids make Angie react, but Angie goes crazy and attacks him, starting to bite his neck, making him go into shock and then faint. Liu had gotten rid of all the monsters, but then someone throws something at him, and a woman overflowing a purple energy would arrive with Liu. Shin attacks Liu, but he manages to stop his first attack using only his foot. These two seem to know each other from the past by the way they start talking to each other. The fight resumes, but Liu dodges each of Shin's attacks with ease, which shocked the rest of the prisoners, who, seeing the fight coming towards them, start to run away so as not to get involved. Liu begins to mock Shin for noticing that he was holding back, and using the prisoners begins to hinder his attack. And when it seemed that Shin was going to strike a blow, Liu begins to give him a lecture on how to eliminate someone, defeating him using his strength. He then proceeds to bite him, although he was really just toying with him. He even wants to give him a chance to cut him. However, Liu notices his new collar. So one of the hemomancers explains to him what that necklace was. Besides that, he introduces himself as an admirer. Liu asks him for information about the necklace, so the blonde guy tells him about the prisoner who exploded in a fight. But to Liu's surprise, it was the prisoner who was winning that allowed him to understand the situation, and after that he hits the blonde guy, surprising everyone. However, Chi-Fon noticed that the counter of his necklace went from 399 to 400. Liu began to dream of his mother, who encouraged him to be stronger. When he woke up, Angie was by his side and the wall that did not let them leave had been demolished. He carries her on his back and they walk down a ravine that was in the building. However, Angie does not quite remember what had happened. She only remembers drinking her blood fluid, although he replies that she must have been dreaming and asks her not to speak so that she does not wear out her strength. He planned to take her to the infirmary, but she asks him why he always saves her, so he reminds her of the time they met, and how when he saw her laughing he began to cry. Then she gave him her stuffed animal, so he tells her that it reminded him of his mother. That's why he swore to protect her. While they were talking, a kind of dragon passed by them. In the vault, several prisoners were trying with all their might to open the door, while Liu pestered Shin to give him more information about that place, although he contemptuously refused to help him. While Chi Fan was gathering his clothes, he proposed to look for his friends, but Wen Xiao opposed, alleging that they had left them to their fate, questioning that perhaps they are responsible for that. So Chi Fan asked him not to conclude things like that. At that moment, Liu arrives and asks Chi Fan for his clothes, who obediently obeys the order, although Wen Xiao takes the opportunity to ask him for help to get out of there. Liu was amazed by the dragon, but Angie asks him to put her down, so he proposes to rest a little. She begins to talk and asks him to leave her and begins to confront him, claiming that he has more important things than her. But at that he begins to cough, and she tells him to just protect the kids who are his family, although he insists on leaving her there. But at that she confesses that she loved him. Liu begins to question Wen Xiao's motives and very calmly reaches the vault door and with a simple movement opens it, concluding that in that reality the useful ones will live, but the others will perish. The prisoners are frightened, although he orders them to create their own paths, although Wen Xiao exclaims that he will follow him, to which the others join him as well. Chi Fan tries to stop his friend, but he insists on blaming their being there on Liu, saying to leave, wishing him to find Angie. At that, Shin approaches him and tells him the last he heard from Liu, while he confessed to him all the truth he had kept from Angie, although, as they walked, the path was cut off and Angie began to weaken. On the other hand, the agent had arrived at the orphanage, which had been closed because the director passed away, to ask for Liu, but discovers that he did not belong there. But at that he sees a box of donut toys, so he asks the caretaker to show him the list of donors, and when he opens the doll, he discovered a microphone. Chi Fan asks Shin for more information about his friends. He annoyed replies that he only saw when Liu used his hemomancy to jump into a ventilation duct and escape. That was a surprise to him, because he did not know that about his friend. Shin arrives where the bodies of the monsters that Liu eliminated were, being astonished, so Chi Fan asks him what relationship they had, because he did not eliminate him. Before that, Shin asks him to stop asking so much. He replies that he does not usually ask so many questions, it is that he only wants to understand the situation. But Shin summarizes that this is not necessary, since his only mission is to survive in Aori. At that, the bodies of the monsters begin to disintegrate, leaving the two surprised, but inside one of the bodies was a human-shaped crystal. Chi Fan grabs it to see it, but expresses feeling weird. Shin takes it out of his hand, and immediately begins to melt in his hand. That would be enough for him to agree to help him look for Liu, as he feels some curiosity. The detective arrived at his house with the box full of dolls that had a microphone inside, listening to one of the conversations. Casually, the boys complained that they wanted to get rid of the orphanage, discovering that they robbed the bank because they wanted to save the orphanage. They all agreed, even though it was something dangerous. Liu was going down some rubble when Angie falls on his back, but when he tries to help her, he begins to hear the voices of his friends, accusing him and scared. He panicked, but at that, one of the monsters appears from his back, although Liu, annoyed, decides to confront him. Shin and Chi Fan arrived at the hall where the boys fought the two monsters, but since he wouldn't shut up, Shin orders him to stop talking or he will attract monsters, clarifying that on the ground it seems that there was a fight recently, adding that they did not find the bodies of Liu or Angie, so they must be alive. At that, the beep that had stunned the boys begins to sound again, but Shin manages to decipher where it came from. Meanwhile, Liu fought the monster with a stone, and then dragged it with his power to a wall, knocking it out and then finishing it off by whipping its head against a stone. And then another arrives from Angie's back and takes it with his mouth. Liu tries to go to his aid, but is caught by the monster, and when trying to struggle, ends up fainting. When he wakes up, he does it confused in a completely unknown place with a strange girl on top of him, who does not look like someone normal, but after walking a little, he is reunited with Chi Fan and Shin, who had saved them. But Chi Fan, upset and crying, begins to beat him for having allowed that to happen to Angie, questioning him for having failed to his promise. Liu remains silent for a while, but often also hit Chi, apologizing and with tears begs him to believe that he could not do anything. But he does not believe him and continues to hit him, so both begin to peel each other. Chi Fan tells him what had happened, and then asks him why he had not told them he was a hemomancer, but decides to leave him and asks what they will do. But Liu replies that he has no idea. To which Chi Fan says that he will look for his friend to get out of there. Shin asks Ivan, but seeing Liu's silence, he understands that he perished. Although he remembers that when he stayed on a dead-end road, a stone fell and a diamond-shaped portal opened. The group of prisoners and Liu arrived at what it seems, the ruins of a school. On the other hand, the rare girl arrived with Angie, and after licking her lies on her, and after that Angie opens his eyes. Angie walks towards Liu, but when he raises his head, she was not there, but he noticed the door open, and when he went to her and opened it, he noticed that Angie was alive. Being astonished, Chi-Fon peeks out at seeing his friend, but seeing her, he runs with all the love to hug her, starting to cry on her. Liu analyzes her and everything seems to be in order, although Shin does not believe that she has revived, and then scolded Chi for being so crybaby. So she confused asks why they thought she had died, so Shin explains that they found her without vital signs. Although she exclaims that there are things she does not remember, beyond that several monsters attacked them and that Liu saved her. But in that she remembers that a girl was next to her and had bitten her, Chi supposes that it is Yea, and that he sees her on the roof and orders her to go down, but he explains that he called her that because he only said Yea. As they try to convince her to come down, she throws herself with a kick in Chi's face. Liu asks them where they had found her, so he tells them that it was when they passed through a room from which a strange beep came out. But it was as if the room would change skin, and in it there were holes with a liquid that was capable of melting steel, in which they found her. Chen insists on leaving, but Shin confesses to being afraid of women, so he took her and they ran away. They continue talking, relating perhaps that room that melted is related to the monsters that also dissolve, so he asks them to take him there. In the morning, Liu explains to Chi that they felt that noise when they were in the vault, and it was the same in the room where Yea was. He believes that Yea had been brought before, adding that maybe there is the way out of there. She questions that they left Shin alone with the girls, but Liu replies that he must be having a hard time. Indeed, the poor man sweated and blushed just by having them in front of him. However, Shin asks Angie if she knew anything about Aoi, but since she denies knowing anything, he asks her why the android looked like her. But at that he realizes that Yea's necklace was at 5, so he throws himself on her neck. While the boys are exploring, they encounter a monster and armed Liu's people, so Liu takes them under cover, discovering that they were looking for more weapons. That's what the mouthful sounds like, and Angie calls it desperate, which attracted the guys. Liu answers the call and Angie tells him that Yea's counter had dropped to 5. So the guys get scared and Liu tries to figure out if there is a way to save her. So they decide to suspend the search for that room. But Liu claims to have an idea and is not to return, and instructs them to take care of Yea. Then, Liu and Chi surrender in peace, asking to be taken with Liu. Angie would be somewhat scared to have heard shots, but Shin tries to calm her down by saying that they must be from Liu's people, although she does not know who he was. Then he explains that he was a dangerous criminal who wants revenge on the director of BST, which makes Angie more nervous. Liu tells him that his plan is to steal the weapons to help Yea eliminate monsters and thus raise his counter. But they make so much noise that they attract the attention of a monster, so they run, and almost Chi-Fon ends up devoured. But Liu saved him. Chi-Fon and Liu run through the streets after hearing a scream of a monster that Wenchao and other guys were fighting. However, Liu tells his friend that his priority is to find Liu, although Chi questions if they can save Yea if they catch a monster. Liu comments that he is not sure, but noticed things that lead him to conclude that. Chi asks for explanations, although Liu responds that it is not easy, but that he will understand. At that they hear a gunshot, so assuming it's Liu's people they head there. The monster had gone completely crazy and was attacking everyone, which triggered panic among Liu's men. Wenchao became worried because he was running out of bullets. But in that the monster throws itself towards him, although he did not back down. But in that he is dragged being surprised. However, Liu tells him that he needs that monster and leaves Wenchao complaining. He uses a chain to move and connect a kick to the monster's face, rendering him unconscious, but at that he notices the monster begin to transform. The others decided to tie him up to prevent him from getting out of control again. Chi-Fon tries to get Wenchao back with them, but he denies wanting to go back to them, and tells him that they should not be there. Wenchao claims Liu for being there since he does not relate anything. Besides being treated as the leader of that group, Liu tells him not to make ideas, that they are not there for him, but that they want to talk to his boss. So Wenchao asks him why, so he responds that he wants to make a deal, claiming that he didn't care. Wenchao exclaims not to talk to him like that, but after they are checked he allows them to go with Liu. In the abandoned restaurant, Angie was worried about her friends, so Shin replies that they will be fine because she cannot eliminate each other. But in that something catches her attention outside and she decides to go and see. But when she goes to another room, she begins to agonize and falls to her knees panting in pain, and then several blades emerge from her body. On the other hand, when Liu and Chi-Fon were taken to Liu, she remembers that like that child, they had encountered a red stone, which alarmed Liu. But Chi worriedly responds that it melted in Shin's hand. Then Liu attributes that stone awakens the Hemomancer powers, remembering the day he woke up his, and adds that when that happens the people around can get hurt. She cares about the girls. However, Liu does not want to pass up that opportunity and wants to negotiate quickly and then go to their aid, begging him not to awaken his power. Upon arriving at Liu's office, they start calling him, until they mention Shin, so he leaves annoyed with Ifan, leaving Liu surprised. Upon entering, Liu tells him that they saw Shin eat one of his swords, so Liu replies that it is an indication that he is awakening his powers, but he does not give it much importance. So Liu proceeds to ask him if he knows the rule of necklaces. He laughs and asks if they want me to capture a monster for her. But Liu replies that no, they just want a couple of weapons to do it themselves. That triggers Liu's laughter and asks Ifan what he thinks. But she replies that they seem to hide something. So Liu asks them why do all that for her. So he replies that he saved someone important to him and wants to return the favor. After hearing it, he thinks it is interesting, but asks him how he plans to capture a monster alive, showing them that he had many weapons with him, which he allows them to take. But in return he asks for something in return. Angie was looking for Yea, but in doing so, he notices that something strange was happening to Shin, which was the moment that swords began to come out of his body, and after going crazy he begins to cut everything, destroying the restaurant. Liu gives them the weapons, but first he asks Liu about his power and what he knew about hemomancy, but he comments that nothing, because he still does not know how to use his power well, which causes Liu funny, but in that he shows him one portal, and comments that they are Aori's barrier. Liu comments that this is what keeps them locked there, and that they will not leave unless they deactivate it. Liu does not understand anything, so Liu tells him that he made his base in that school because of how convenient it is, although Chi begins to despair and Ifan begins to annoy him. But in that Liu asks Liu to work together, surprising him. However, he does not consider himself of use to him, so he ends up rejecting him. So Liu wishes him good luck and throws him into the portal. But Liu uses his power. Then Liu manages to understand his power, and exclaims that by the way he thinks and speaks he is someone strong, but he considers him his enemy for not being on his side. Starting a small fight, Liu manages to get rid of Liu and using his ability takes Chi Fan, but leaves him a grenade to prevent them from following him. So Liu laughs asking if that was his plan. But in that Wenchao sees that Liu's radio fell and through her he hears Angie asking for help. Liu are on the run. When they fall on a rooftop, Chi Fan asks him what happened to the deal. He replies that he did not, that Liu wanted to work together, but that he rejected it because Ifan was with him, mentioning that he believes she has the ability to read minds. She asks about her, so Liu comments that she must hold a grudge, although she refrains from telling him for now, claiming that they must arrive soon with the girls and Shin before his power awakens. The detective who is now with a helper is still investigating. His assistant tells him that he investigated the name of the donors and that they were all fake, but among them was the name of Liu's mother. Although the strange thing was that she kept donating, even after she disappeared, so they assumed that there was something like money laundering between someone from the bank and the orphanage. Even with that, the detective feels that he is overlooking something, but in that he gets out of the car to buy cigarettes, and when he leaves, a sniper falls on top of the car, and from the top of a building a sniper begins to shoot him until he is cornered. After that he would be intercepted by BST people whom he defeated. Meanwhile, Angie took refuge with Yea de Shin in a corridor, but at one point he apparently found them. Although there are monsters out there, Shin kills them on impulse, which the girls take advantage of to flee. On the other hand, Liu's men were preparing with all their weapons to go hunting, although Liu calls it a party, adding that he is curious to see if he can capture a monster by himself. They were ready to go and capture a monster. Shin reaches the girls and was ready to eliminate them, although Angie asked him to react. But at that moment Liu arrives and takes him to try to make him react. Angie is surprised that they found them. So Chi Fan explains that they heard some cries of monsters, and that he tells them that Shin had awakened his hemomancy, and that being the first time he will lose control. Shin almost crosses Liu, but he manages to get out unharmed, decides to flee and asks Chi to take the girls to that place, promising to talk there. Angie, confused, asks for an explanation, so Chi tells her the plan to save Yea. Liu tries to escape from Shin, although it is complicated, because he does not stop throwing swords, so he decides to take him to where that monster almost devours Chi, but in that, Shin throws a sword at him, causing him to fall. Liu tries to move forward, but when he gets near the door he shouts for the worm monster to come out and end up taking Shin away. Angie does not want to be disconnected, so she asks him to tell her all his plan, so he tells her what had happened and that worm monster cannot leave the building according to Liu, so that they will use for Yea to eliminate it with explosives. For a moment there was silence in the building, but at that, Shin furiously walks out the door dragging the worm with him, and then sticks all his blades into it. But from inside another monster emerges. Shin is still crazy, but his body is reaching its limit, so Liu tries to stop him, and at the same time the others arrive. Yea begins to cry, but when Chi tries to calm her down, he hears a monster roaring, so he assumes that she feels it. However, he decides to flee with her to where Liu was. while Liu desperately tried to keep Shin from eliminating their remaining monster. But in the process, he begins to be cornered by the monster. It is then that Angie calls Shin's attention to pursue her and help Liu. Shin throws himself on her, but she crosses in the middle and saves her, being pierced by the katana, and Shin would have finished him at that moment. But Liu saved him and desperately tries to make Shin react to blows. Seeing that, Chi tries to convince Angie to flee, claiming that Liu plans to sacrifice himself with Shin. She insists, even proposes to use the grenades against Shin. So he slaps her to react. However, she lets loose a speech that they had met by chance, so she wants to make a decision of her own. So taking a grenade goes to the aid of his friend, who was giving his last energies. When Angie arrives and just seeing the grenade in his hand, he decides to accept the help. And when it was the best moment, she threw it. But Shin noticed it and rejected it, although in that Angie awakened his hemomancy by returning the grenade to Shin, exploding in his face. After the explosion, Angie runs to Liu's body, and believing that he had perished and seeing how Shin stood up again, she angrily took a sword and threw herself at him. However, Liu manages to stop her, and in her ear tells her that everything is fine and convinces her to let go of the sword, starting to cry bitterly. At the same moment, Shin faints. After that, Angie bandaged Chi, but her spirits had waned as she tried to eliminate Shin and blames herself for acting madly. But Liu encourages her by telling her that she did the right thing. Then he wants to continue with the plan, and as he is a Diu as walking machina, he asks Angie for the bakutakwe or radio, and after breaking it he turns a detonator, explaining that he will place bombs in the monster's building. And although they were doubtful, he makes them promise that they will detonate it in 12 minutes. Liu moves stealthily inside the building so as not to attract monsters. At the same time, he places the grenades, but when trying to find a way out of there before detonations are inside, he sees a hole in the ceiling through which, when entering, he reaches a library where the corpse of a normal man was. Meanwhile, outside the building, Angie and Chi assume that everything is going well because they do not hear the slightest noise. However, when Angie begins to feel bad about how useless it has been, he discovers that she had also awakened her power of hemomancy. Also, Liu investigates in the library, discovering a necklace that belonged to a friend of him and his mother. So, when he continues searching, he finds a diary, in which he finds that they had found a strange cave in which some strange things came out, and having failed in their original plan, they should take people to that place. When Liu investigates his system, he discovers that the BST was related, but in that he is attacked by a monster, so he flees to continue placing the grenades, but is caught by one of the monsters. However, Angie, who had decided to enter, arrives with him and using his power, manages to save him and gives him time to finish placing the bombs. After that, they flee being chased by the monster, but outside Wenchao had arrived with 3 men. He begins to argue for no reason with Chi, but at that, when Angie come out and shout at Chi to proceed with the plan. Chi nods Wenchao and gives the detonator to Ye, but to prevent the monster from coming out, Angie stops him with all his strength, although he begins to go crazy, so that Liu helps her control herself. It is at that instant that Ye activates the switch because Chi had taught her, detonating the bombs. The building collapsed and Ye's counter went up. But in that, Wenchao picks up his weapon and seeing Angie's power, he remembers that they had seen something like this on the day of the robbery. So annoyed, he accuses her of having been responsible for having eliminated the hostages. In that appear a lot of portals from which the monsters emerge, so everyone tries desperately to flee. But Wenchao only takes Angie, leaving Liu to his fate, although he is saved by Shin, who, while trying to defend, loses his left arm. When all seemed lost, Liu arrives with his men who defeat several monsters with explosions. And when Shin was losing control, Liu grabs him by the neck and questions him for being weak, just like seeing how pathetic Liu was for perishing. So he kicks him, and being ready to eliminate Shin, Angie saves him using his power. In that, the dragon arrives and Liu, annoyed, frees himself from the technique of Angie, and with a blow eliminates the dragon, discovering that inside it, there is a gigantic blue gem which takes the form of a woman until it becomes the friend of Liu and his mother. Hit the like button and subscribe if you like it. Write in the comments the word Inferno if you want more videos like this one.